Greetings! Today I bring more content. Okay, so this is my 1986, you want to be technical, sure, it's a 85 and a half Escort L. So it's practically a base model if it isn't already a base model. I forget and I'm getting carried away. But someone had installed a hitch setup on it, and this is, from what I can tell, period correct. Because there's no way that someone would sell this today, because one, these cars are pushing 40 years old. Mine already is. So there's no support. But two, there's just no good way to go about installing a hitch onto one of these cars. However, at some point I will get rid of these. We will see. Tempted on keeping that one. Tempted on keeping this one just for the hell of it. Anyhow, so I have before us a few different hitches that you could consider having on your Escort, or actually EXP even for that matter, or Escort GT, Lynx, whatever. It's pretty much any of those Escort-based cars. These hitches will work. I was going to say work well on, but they'll work on. They'll fit well. Whether they work well or not, that's. Anyhow, getting carried away again. So there's the two styles. There's the one that bolts on or welds on to your existing rear bumper. Now, almost all the rear bumpers are going to be just steel. On all the Escorts, they're all supposed to be chrome steel. On all the EXPs, they're just supposed to be steel. One of mine, however, is a aluminum rear bumper on one of my 82 EXPs. So if you somehow have an aluminum rear bumper, you do not want to be putting a hitch on one of these. You're just going to bend it up real bad. Now, the rear bumpers that are on the EXPs, they do have a little bit more structural integrity than these guys. See, this one's, it's been pinched a little on the end. This side's unfazed, but they pinch on the ends, and then in the centers, all they have for structural strength, height-wise, is just a little inch-wide bar that goes across them, and it's not even an 1/8 inch thick. It's real flimsy. If I had a hammer, one strike could buckle that in. So do you want to put a hitch on your bumper? I definitely would not recommend it. So like I said, you're going to hurt the bumper itself most of the times. But if you have an all steel bumper, you can definitely build this thing up so it handles it. The problem that comes with that is, what can your bumper shock absorbers handle? They're not the most strongest thing, and there's a few reasons for that. If I open up this deck lid, we'll see for sure. But there's a few problems with that. One, they do move. They're designed to telescope a little bit. How much, I don't know, but they do telescope some. Two, because they telescope, they do bend. You know, when your bumper is on the car and you stand on it, if you stand on it maybe, 4 to 10 times, it will bend. It will bend one of the two, if not both. That's what happens to EXPs all the time. It's because when the tail lights are on, there's a nice foot-long spot where the license plate goes, but they also recess the bumper up in there, so it looks like you have a step there. So a lot of people step there. You have people who really way too much to be stepping on it, but people step there, and those suckers bend. They bend. Your bumper will be fine, but those shock absorbers bend. They really do bend. I can't say it enough, because a lot of people just aren't interested in listening, but that's what happens. If you're only 100 pounds, you're not going to make any difference. You're not going to hurt these. If you're pushing 200, a few steps on them will bend one, if not both. If you're 250 or higher, you're going to bend these the first time you step on them. That's just how it's going to go. But then the other issue is, what they're mounted to is just 20 or 22 gauge steel body shell. That's it. It's just 20 or 22 gauge steel. It's real thin stuff. It's only meant for body, but that's what they're mounted onto, and there's not much there. There's a little steel pocket. There we go, shaped like this, and it runs down the length of the shock absorber inside the car, but that's only a span of 8 to 12 inches depending on the car. But when you put the weight on the end, it tilts the rear up, not down, so the pocket doesn't really do much. It just keeps it from going side to side or twisting. But there's nothing to keep it from going up. So once it goes up, it buckles your floor upwards, and then it's really, really hard to fix. And when it buckles the floor bad enough, it'll actually mess with your suspension. And then the fit and finish of your quarter panels, your rear hatch, it can crinkle the spare tire, and you can have other issues. But that leads me to my next point, is this hitch setup. You can see it just clamps onto those bumper shock absorbers via U-bolt. And that's fine. If you're going to mount anything on these absorbers, that's the place to do it right there. There's not going to be much flex. That part actually doesn't move. That's the receiving end of the telescope. But underneath, I'll slip the camera in, and hopefully you can see it. They just bolt this onto the bottom of the spare tire wall. And the spare tire wall, they rust. Happens, moisture collects in there, and that's what makes them rust. And when you use a spare tire in the wet, you have to put a tire back in it in the wet, it rusts. But that metal is, again, only 20-22 gauge steel. So it's not very strong stuff. Remember how I said if you weigh 200 pounds or more, you can do damage to the shock absorbers just by standing on the bumper. Same thing in that spare tire wall. If you weigh 200 pounds or more and you stand in that spare tire wall, you will bend it. It will be manipulated to some extent. Worse if it's rusty or thinning. Even worse if it's wholly don't fall through. But yeah, that's what you're up against with that. If it wasn't for that, this would be a somewhat sturdy design. You grab it, you don't really move it because it's bolted in pretty well. And on the top side, there should be a plate like there is inside this bumper. You can see there is indeed a plate there for it. Well, it keeps the bolts from popping out, but it also keeps this from distorting. Kind of. It helps. That's the best I can say, is it helps. But yeah, this does the same thing, just on the car instead of the bumper. So, which is better? This one will cause you a lot of grief. This is on a moving component, which is no bueno. But it's also on one that warps and distorts very easily. If all you're hauling is a little, like a 3x5 trailer, and all you ever do is take that to the dump, this will be just fine. However, if you have, say, a jet ski and you want to tote it around on your Escort, with your Escort on a jet ski trailer, this will be insufficient. You'll start doing some damage, and of course you could start hauling unrealistic loads like a 5x8 trailer with an ATV or garden tractor in it. Yeah, that's unrealistic. You're going to damage a lot of crap. Just speaking bumper wise, and these shock absorber wise, structural wise, you're going to cause problems. what your engine and transmission can handle and your brakes can handle. And that's up for you to decide. So this one is better, but is it still good? Because just because it's better doesn't mean that it's good. Yeah, it's better. I wouldn't rely on it, but like I said, it is great for something small like a 3x5 that all you ever do is throw a couple bags of trash in the trailer and go out to the dump. That's totally fine. So if I were to keep a hitch and install a hitch on any of my cars, it would only be for that purpose. It's just going to the dump, running errands. It's a place to put a cooler for a family reunion at the ballpark, whatever. That's about it. You're not going to haul anything even remotely heavy. It's just going to be what's very light, but somehow physically won't fit in your car. That's a good reason to have the Escort wagon. You'll never need a hitch, because if it doesn't fit in the car, you really shouldn't be hauling it. With an EXP, you can fit a lot in it. But if you and a friend are going camping for a weekend, the trailer could be handy, just to make sure that you have room for sleeping bags, tent, etc. All the little things that you need to be sure you have, whether they fit inside or not. But yeah, that's about all this is good for. If you put any serious weight on it, like I said, like an ATV or something, it's just going to ruin your spare tire well. And if it's heavy enough, it's going to ruin your shock absorbers and eventually snap them bolts, because you only got 4 of those bolts holding this guy onto your shock absorbers. Sure, you have bigger bolts on the back end of this in your car, but that's thinner metal. So there's more takes than gives, but there are gives and takes to these. There's just a few things to consider. If you guys see any other arrangements of these, definitely give a shout. I've seen some of the universal Kurt ones, but we're looking at the same issues. But video's long enough, so we'll catch you guys later.